Would you be able to journey for thousands of miles from Canada to Mexico using only your directional instincts? Most people would turn down this challenge and say no. But one species, weighing less than a gram, makes this lengthy trip by flight, the monarch butterfly. Each winter, the distinct orange and black-winged insects fly south to Mexico to find a warmer climate. Months later, as winter comes to a close and spring blossoms, they make their way back north.
The part that fascinates me most about the monarchs is that's where their migration ends. And so the females will lay eggs and they'll die. And it's the subsequent generations that will carry on the migration. And it takes 3 to 5 generations to complete the final loop. But in the fall, the monarchs that are born, they will fly that epic duration from wherever they're born in the United States and in Canada to Mexico over winter and then fly back north in the spring.
That's Sara Dykman, a wildlife biologist and the author of the book Bicycling with Butterflies. In 2017, Dykman biked the monarch's migration path from southwestern Mexico to Canada and back. The trip totaled more than 10,200 miles and required her to bike about 8 hours a day for 8 months. So why did she embark on this massive journey? The main goal was to raise awareness of this extraordinary migration and the current challenges the species is facing.
I stayed with 68 families on my trip, and I presented at 49 schools and with 31 organizations, and each one was a connection. And then when I leave, they are still with me when I leave, and I'm still with them. And all the people I met, they'll email me and say, I saw a butterfly. And that's what I love, is I'm kind of helping call to attention these animals that are in our backyards.
Along her journey, Dykman did run into some people who were skeptical of why she was putting herself through this taxing voyage, all for some bugs. She recalls an instance in Texas where she was looking around for some butterfly eggs in a patch of milkweed, and people got the wrong idea.
People had called the cops because they thought I'd crashed. And so a cop drives up and is like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm looking for butterflies. And I'd invited him to come look at these caterpillars I was checking out. And he definitely did that thing where he just slowly backed away and got back in his car and drove off. So I recognize that this isn't for everyone, but I think the more details you know about the monarch, the more likely you are to find them fascinating. And there's just so many wonderful secrets that are waiting to be discovered.
However, in recent years, the monarch butterfly population has dwindled due to the loss of their natural habitat, containing their primary food source, the milkweed plant. Milkweed is a native North American shrub that blooms flowers in the summertime, and its nectar provides sugar and nutrients for the species.
Eastern population of monarchs has suffered about a 90% decline in the population over the last 20 years. Is linked to habitat loss. And the very simple equation is if there is no milkweed, there are no monarchs. And milkweed, like I said, is that special plant that is the only food source of the monarch caterpillar. And luckily, it has not a very beautiful name, milkweed, but it is a beautiful plant. And there's lots of different species with different color blossoms, but they all kind of have these like clusters of flowers that remind me of shooting stars.
These milkweed plants are vital to the existence of the monarchs. The good news is that these butterflies will seek out milkweed wherever it's planted.
The number one thing that we all can do, and one of the beautiful things about the monarch, is that they don't need to have just these like pristine national park type wild places. They are home everywhere. I saw monarchs in New York City. I saw monarchs in farmlands in Texas. I saw monarchs at school gardens. And so the idea is that we can all turn to our own little corner of the earth and start replacing the grass and returning that land to the prairie. I encourage people, start small, start with a corner, and then every spring celebrate the monarchs by adding more. And more monarchs will come as you add more and more and more.
Dykman says it doesn't take large amounts of money or sweeping commitments to create change. It's about individual actions driven by greater awareness of these beautiful winged creatures.
It's such an adventure in itself. You don't have to bike 10,000 miles to be part of the solution. You really can have this incredible adventure and really help the monarchs by just planting a small garden in your yard. And I think, one monarch alone is just a butterfly, but thousands create a migration. And I think we can say the same about gardens. One garden is just a garden, but thousands of people are growing these gardens. And so that adds up to something big. That adds up to a solution.
Common milkweed is a great garden plant that can thrive in regular soil, full sun, and not only benefits the monarchs, it can provide a much-needed habitat and food for other varieties of butterflies and pollinating bees. If you're interested in adding milkweed to your own balcony, backyard, or garden, you can either buy milkweed as a plant, or Dykman says many local garden centers carry seed starters. Once the plant blooms, she says that the monarchs will come, and it's a fascinating sight to see their wings up close and in full detail. When's the last time you saw a butterfly?
I think it's important, too, for older generations to be reminded of that. I think we start to take things for granted. But then if you go back outside and you look at a little egg and you think about the detail and you think about what that egg is, what is happening inside that egg and the whole process, you're just astounded. And I think there's just so much that we take for granted and we forget to even see because we're looking but we're not seeing.
So is Dykman thinking about another future trip alongside the migrating monarchs? Well, she hasn't quite ruled it out yet. To learn more about these butterflies and our guest, Sara Dykman, visit viewpointsradio.org. You can also find out more about her new book, Bicycling with Butterflies, at beyondabook.org. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
Welcome to today's Book Minute, brought to you by booktrib.com, the leading source for book news and reviews. Celebrated novelist Mike Bond has been called one of the 21st century's most exciting authors. His new historical epic, America, is the first of a 7-book series that relives the last 70 years and our nation's most profound upheavals since the Civil War, a time that defined the end of the 20th century and where we are today. Book 1, America, opens in the shadows of World War II and Korea and ends in the late 1960s, a decade that shook America to its foundation. President Kennedy's assassination, the tragic and unpopular Vietnam War, the battle for civil rights and women's liberation, a cosmic clash of riots and burning cities, and an explosion of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Through the wild, joyous, heartbroken, and visionary lives of 4 young people and many others, the 60s come alive again. America by Mike Bond is available now at bookstores everywhere.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
I think in the long run, these people are going to disappear and Dogecoin will fall about 99% lower than it is today. It's just a question of when that's going to happen.
Inside the world of cryptocurrency. Then,
I think there's still kind of a taboo around talking about money, and it's shifting, but we aren't quite there yet.
The touchy conversation of money management. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.